Welcome everyone to the final night of the Gala Ball for 2021.
Yay!
Thanks so much for staying with us for the fabulous program. We really hope that you've enjoyed seeing the amazing talent that is in the community all around you in the city of Yarra. We've got one more special treat for you tonight. Nita is coming to talk about all of her cultural background and give us an amazing performance. If you've ever seen Nita perform before, you'll know it's a dazzling spectacle. So thank you, Nita. Thank you everyone for being part of the Gala Ball this year, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Merry Christmas.
Hi everybody. My name is Netta Romani.
Hi gang, I'm Zan Coleman. How are you?
Yeah, how is everyone? Write to us. Tell us how you are. We're here to have a discussion on culture.
On culture. But a little intro to where we are. We're on the edge of a town called Lismore out in the Western Districts, far western end of Wotherong country. And we thought we'd take a little walk around the garden before we find a shady spot to sit.
We'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land, the Wotherong people, and acknowledge their culture, their history, especially their history with the arts and storytelling, passing down culture throughout this region. And the Wotherong region is really massive.
It is.
And so it's amazing to be here in Lismore, knowing the Wotherong in Janjak or Janjuk, depends how you pronounce it, and knowing it stretches all the way over here, hours into the country. And just so you know, we are in Lismore, Victoria, on Wotherong country.
We're not in New South Wales, the little sister New South Wales, little sister Lismore.
So we acknowledge their ancestors, past and present. Let's take a walk.
Yeah, what do you reckon? Walk around the house?
Yes, please. Here we are. Here's the house behind us.
So, yeah, we're going to talk about culture. That's what we're here to do, isn't it?
Yes.
We are in farming community these days, so there's a lot of agriculture up here, cropping and livestock mostly. Small towns out here in the Western District mostly too, but the communities that are interested in engaging with visitors. So nice to have you here with us, sweetheart.
Thank you for the invitation out to Lismore. I'd never heard of Lismore, Victoria before. Zan is a great friend of mine over more than a decade. We've been working together.
Yeah.
We're actually celebrating a decade of work together, a decade of sharing culture with each other and with the people that seem to find their way into our audiences.
That's right.
Our dining room tales. So a good friend, someone who I do share culture with. I share story with, share time with, share friendship, share our family, landmarks, everything. Yeah.
I'll walk through the orchard maybe as we...
We are going this way. Look at this beautiful land here, and we have a fruit orchard.
Yeah, that's just my ugly mug, but the orchard,
Planted by?
orchards down here. We've planted this orchard over 30 years. Plenty of native trees, gardens. We've got some olives growing as well. So I guess a little bit of food culture, which is kind of one thing that we're interested here, and one thing that Netta and I get together on through this dining room tales idea that we just mentioned. Performances, performance works where artists share their life and their interests and their practice based around a meal that they cook for their assembled guests. Netta was the first awesome person to come and collaborate with me on that idea 10 years ago, and we're coming back to the table to have another crack at it at the minute. But being out here on the farm, at least in my reflection on culture, is certainly a little bit about food and about sustenance and about how we use those things to sustain ourselves, sustain our community, and create the spaces to enable culture to move us, enable each other to move the community in the direction that needs to go. So, where are we now? Almond tree down there.
One of my favourites back there. We just passed a laden lemon tree and kaffir lime.
Yeah.
Something that Zan and I have shared a lot of lemon pickle and lemon chili with our audiences and our families over the years. Perfect to go next to Persian Mauritian cuisine that we cook together.
everyone said we wouldn't grow a kaffir lime down here, but it's just nuts. It does everything we need. So come and explore some Thai cooking with us sometimes as well. In fact, in Lismore at the golf club down the road, we've got a Thai lady cooking every Friday night. Who lives in town. So yeah, come and join us with that. I should probably let her know about my kaffir lime.
Yeah, she would love to know that there's a local kaffir lime that's strong, delivering fragrant leaves.
Do we want to find a shady place and perch a bit?
Let's do it.
Well, not much back here through the gardens.
So traditionally my work with Zan and most of my work is in Melbourne City, where I love to share culture. Melbourne City, a city alive with music, alive with people, alive with conversations. So many people who've come from different places to either find family or find work or make families or make works. Yeah.
And a huge part of that, Netta, from my observation is music and your connection with the music scene, and indeed, hard work in promoting the local music scene, and particularly percussion. It feels like rhythm is a big thing in the way you experience those.
That's right.
Those community connections. Can you tell me a bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So percussion, drumming cultures, and culture itself. I mean, I choose rhythm because it's so accessible for anybody, for everybody, and in so many ways, even if we think way back in time, rhythms from all of our history were the first things to emerge, even before melodies, even before conversations and language, and all the different modes of art and culture. Well, I'm making assumptions, but I believe that some of the oldest cultural traditions are rhythmic traditions. Rhythms, different types of drums, different types of connections, and I like to use it because I still feel today, more than ever, it's immediately accessible to everyone, be it a very young person, an older person, or a professional musician of any type, or an amateur musician, or somebody who just is ready to connect. I feel like rhythm presents an opportunity for us to come together and share something. So, yeah.
It's really interesting, isn't it, the thinking about how natural those things are. I've just been plugged, but I've been re-listening to an audio book of a book that I read many years ago. Oliver Sacks is a neuroscientist, book called Musicophilia, and he talks about the things that go on in the brain in relation to music, and there's a lot of conjecture around whether musical ability arose alongside language and speech, or predated, or came subsequent to. But there is certainly something very elemental about it in our human capacities. Makes us what we are. So yeah,
connects us together.
I get what you're saying.
In tradition, in good times, in sad times, at birthdays, on birthdays, and we've got some instruments to share, but we do need to find somehow. How are we going to?
Why don't we perch on one of these drums? Is that going to work?
Oh yes, sure.
Are you still rolling?
Yeah, I'm definitely still rolling. Done.
Can we all be heard from that distance?
I think so. We will have to project, but I think we will be heard. Hello, everybody. Here we are. So to carry on from there, I might even just play a little 1 minute of music.
Rhythm it up.
Here we go. We've got the Ravan drum from Mauritius. This Ravan is one that I bought when I was in Mauritius from Michel Legris, translates to Michel the Great. They speak Creole in Mauritius, and just like we were saying, I like to think about that moment maybe when the first rocks were hit together in time by a human. That moment that he went, or they went, they beat those rocks together and they went, oh, that's a rhythm. So that moment, I in this song, which I wrote with my auntie in Sydney, auntie and uncle in Sydney, I told them I wanted to write a song about that moment when the first rocks were hit together to make the first sounds. And the first lyric is Mon poule rencontre toi là-bas, on balaba, on ça avait commencé. So take me back to where the first sounds were made, way back there down there, where the first rocks made the first sounds. So have a little listen to a bit of the song. Here's the Ravan. so much,
What
Zan.
what's this one down? What's this one down
Oh,
here?
yeah.
'Cause
Straight into it. Let's do it.
It looks pretty similar, but it's not. I know.
Zan's asking me about this drum, similar size. Looks really, really similar. If you look behind, there's a tiny difference. It's the duff from Iran, the Persian duff. And this one is the ravan from Mauritius. Two drums from my cultures. So I'm born in Iran, where the chains are on the back of the drums like this. But this drum is where my mother is from, which is from Mauritius. My mother, Michelle Ramani, and all of her sisters and brothers from Mauritius, the Salon family. Yeah, very similar drums. Similar frame drums. Make the same sound from the center, but we've got that, the duff is played using the stopping and starting of that chain on the skin also. I don't play daff properly, I haven't learnt it properly, but the drums, I just think it's so interesting on two sides of the world, one where there's tropical culture and one where the girls are on the beach showing off their legs and flirting with beautiful skirts and tropical vibes with the ravans, and the other culture which is quite different. In the Middle East it's a different story, where the women potentially only play the duff for each other behind closed doors and privacy, because of different cultures, you know? Yeah. So yeah, I've got these two very different cultures within my DNA. And then as you can hear from my Australian accent, I have been brought up in Australia. We came to Australia in 79.
That's what you told me.
Yes, in 1979. And some people may know that date. It may have been familiar on the news for the Iranian Revolution, the Persian-Iranian Revolution, where the Ayatollah Khomeini came in, and quite a few people went out. And yeah, it was a point of change in Iran. But yeah, we came to Australia then, where we were very lucky to find a beautiful home here in Sydney.
And with that really interesting background though, Neds, I mean, culture is such a big term. I mean, we say we're here to talk for half an hour about culture, and Cam won't ever really do that in half an hour. But I mean, what when you think about culture, what is culture really?
Yeah,
like you've got all
culture
these
is,
different inputs and feeds.
Culture is your choices, and whether you're taking on, you know, following the choices your parents or your community made and keeping traditions going. That's one way of doing culture.
Yeah.
Another way of doing culture, which, you know, for some reasons has had to be my way, is by keeping up or finding your old traditions and affirming yourself, along with creating new culture. So culture is the way you spend your time, the choices you make, how you spend your time, how fast you spend it, how slow you spend it, how many different things you choose to do with it, how many different people you choose to pass that time with or can. Yeah,
I think that's important too. It's who you're doing it with as well, isn't it? And how you're how you're using your actions to nurture or not, you know, your community and your people. It's your life practices, isn't it? Really, culture, and it, you know, it extends to a walk around the garden as much as to a run around the block, or a community march around the block, and
yeah, so true.
We're all parts of the same cog, and you know,
The way you choose to spend your time is so important to your well-being. And that's why some cultures really work en masse, if you know what I mean. If a lot of people come together doing the same great things together, it helps some of those things, some of those, you know, those thoughts that come up when you don't have direction or you're not too sure where you're going. It can be very affirming, which is why I think it's very important, especially if you've chosen to make your own culture, to really make the decisions as if you had 100 friends who are into the same thing as you, or 1,000 friends, and make those choices about time, about food, about what you really want to do with your life. Make them around what would really greatly benefit you and your community, and the things that make you naturally feel comfortable with, you know, the great question of what is even life. You know, if we try to take the whole thing on at once, it can be too much, or we can find ourselves working too much, or talking too much about something that's not important to us, or not talking at all, or whinging a lot about something that's really alarmed us. And so I love to really take us back to the bare basics that we know of what makes us do well, feel good, what brings our friendships together, how we can spend our time.
We're all working really hard to get by on one level, aren't we? In fact, we've just sat down in quite a buggy area where all the bugs are working very
The bugs are
hard
trying to
get
become
by
part of our
too.
culture.
They've got their own culture going on as well, seeking to survive. But no, maybe that's just a reminder that in a lot of the things that we do to get by, sometimes they feel like they're in conflict. You know, they're not. Not everyone wants to walk the same pathways as us, right? So maybe a big part of culture and choosing how we advocate for it or promote it or promulgate our views on it is in the points of the intersection and how we can use them to be embracing rather than letting the clash points take over. Yeah,
For sure. And you know, I really want to encourage, a lot of my friends have come from maybe not broken families, but disconnected families, some from broken families, some from broken cultures. The families may still be united, but the cultures are broken. You know, in my family, from my perspective, I think I definitely was one of the family members who had never danced our cultural dance, who had never spoken our cultural language, and decided to directly ask at an older age, so maybe at about the age of 32, I directly started to write to aunties that I didn't have a lot of contact with. This is a song that I would like to write. Are you interested? And then I realized that they're great poets and are interested in writing in old Afro Creole, and you know, the language that I want to sing in, which is I feel connected to, is that side of my mum's tropical island culture, and I feel it's. Yeah, I think, and so you know, it's not something that was passed down to me. I wasn't passed one of these drums. I went to Mauritius myself, and I went to Michel Legree's house, who I didn't know who he was, but I listened to the local guy, and went to his place, and I found the drum, and I went to Menoir, which translates to Black Hands, who is one of the most amazing old Afro Creole artists on the island, who doesn't play modern Sega, but plays old school Afro Sega. Not a language, not very many language. I didn't know any Creole, but he did know a little bit of English, enough for me to say, I want to come for a lesson every day and learn from him. And he very generously taught me how to play a very old school way that doesn't necessarily go with the modern Mauritians in town because they're playing the modern Segas. But I feel very lucky to have learnt that very, that old Afro rhythm, and I feel inspired to write new songs with it that say, take me back to where these cultures began. Let's start from the beginning. If I haven't had it affirmed through other things, I'd like to go back and make a song about that moment where the first rocks hit. Yeah, so I wanted to shout out to everybody out there who, you may be connected. For example, Zan's very connected through this property and his family history. He's got some affirmation there, and there's so much more history even before this property that Zan is connected to and disconnected from. I'm sure there's a lot you could say about that, Zan.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're both artists, as I'm sure many people watching this will be, and I thought one thing that might be interesting to touch on is how does culture exist as a conversation point in society more broadly? You know, you almost hear the words culture wars more often in the presses than you hear the words culture in a celebratory sense. And certainly when it comes to art making, there's sometimes almost a sense that culture is a bit of a dirty word, or a kind of a luxury, or a thing that we can only afford when times are good, or we don't have to tighten the purse strings, or some other kind of economic rationalist nonsense. Whereas, as we've kind of talked about before, it comes from much more elemental places. I don't know. How do you relate to that, Netta, particularly as a essentially a first generation Aussie who came here very young but has grown up, as Aussie as me, of course, to this idea of how Australia kind of feels its culture. I mean, this is massively complex and complicated.
It's a massive topic. I love the question though. Let's do it.
Why aren't we just? Yeah, why aren't we doing it instead of fighting about it? It's a big question.
I think some of the doing is happening within households. Yeah. It's definitely not a mainstream thing that's broadcast. Like I think Australia, or the land known as Australia. That, you know, there's a deep problem there that we haven't acknowledged. That, you know, I mean, so many of us in the arts community know that there are several countries on this country. It's known as Australia through colonialism, and you know, that's where we are today. That's a problem, you know. There's a problem there until we find treaty and really make that meaningful and lasting. And when I say meaningful, I mean meaningful, not just a written paragraph on a website or a something that's said. But until we find meaningful treaty, we are at loss for such valuable cultures that we don't know, you know, that we won't know and won't celebrate as big as Christmas or Hanukkah or all those other things that get celebrated a little bit more commercially or mainstreamly in Australia, until we all understand as a nation that there are hundreds and hundreds of country names within this country, and so much history lost, but still so much history there that's valuable. Until we realize that, it will be a really weird transition and a really kind of disconnected culture. Until then, and you know, I feel like things, I'm optimistic. I'm an eternal optimist, those that know me, and you have to be. You have to think forward and go forward with meaning and purpose. And I think part of our arts community know that purpose and know that meaning and are finding ways to articulate it as we reach the broader conservative community or wider community. And until we get there, we will struggle with that, using Australia as a word and saying, what's Australia's own identity? It's because we're kind of locked in a little bit of a catch-22 there, aren't we?
I think you're right. I think there's a reckoning that we haven't reckoned with. And look, and probably parts of the arts community are doing this more readily than others, and it's going to need to be society-wide before we can move through it or with it, or we'll have to carry it with us forever anyway, because it's part of our history now. But yes, perhaps you're right. We can't shy away from the hard stuff, I think.
Yes. Because
and
there's facts there and there's truth, and
that's right.
yeah, we do find a certain I feel like we gain well-being from being able to respect the truth, and there's so much to gain and so little to lose, even though there's an attitude of what, we're Australia, you know, like, yeah. I feel until we get there, and if we try to use my eternal optimist view of it, if you look at it like, you know, it's 250 years or so since this has happened, right? Since colonialism came in and Australia happened. But if you look at that from perspective of, like I was talking about, those moments where the first rocks hit together on this land and when music was born, it's actually a speck. And there's so much knowledge, and the land knows, you know, the land knows, and the land will auto-correct beyond human existence.
It will.
So in the grand scheme of things, this will always be Indigenous land, and always, and it still always was, always will be Aboriginal land. And so it's a small speck. It's a terrible speck though, and we've got things to apologise for a lot, and a lot of work to do. But there's so much to be gained when that correction happens. And I mean, correction is such an English word, but we need to turn those tables and get onto country, and I believe there's a lot to gain.
Yeah, we've got to be better at finding ways to walk together rather than walking separately, I think. Do you want to drop another rhythm?
Sure. Maybe I'll talk about some of these other drums that we've got here. So like I was saying, drumming culture is so important to me because it's accessible to everyone. You can pick up something and you can get something going. It doesn't even matter what we do right now.
We're using one as a bit of a prop stand at the moment, so we'll bring that one back into view.
This is a tamborim from Brazil. I've spent a little bit of time in Brazil and a lot of time in Australia studying Brazilian rhythms. All the way from Brazil, used in Carnival to amplify the human hand clap. People play these in like lines of 40 next to the big bass drums that are touring down the road, while the rest of the samba schools, they're roving down the street with their snare drums. Africa, it would be the djembe, that's the lead drum. In Brazil, they got these high-pitched caixas and also repeniques that lead the drums, and the iconic breaks. Call and response. And in Brazil, I love how their instruments have been through the industrial age, all coming out of Afro traditions. All, unfortunately, the slaves were taken from Africa to Brazil to work the land. So they brought their instruments and took them through the industrial age, and the iconic Brazilian instruments are all looking very modern now, with lugs and aluminium and synthetic skins.
Well, I've got your head out. The
It doesn't matter. Made light so that you can tour down the road and take the party anywhere. It might be somebody's birthday, and they'll tap it out on a table. Parabéns pra você. Parabéns pra você. Muitas felicidades. Muitos anos enviar.
Hey!
So Brazilians don't even need an instrument. They'll tap it on the side of their car. They'll get it happening. They've got music all through them. One of the reasons why I chose to go to Brazil again is music seems to be so accessible to everyone. Everyone plays. Everybody can play. Everybody has a pandeiro, a tamborim.
Every street corner there's something going on, isn't there?
Any day, Tuesday night can be the biggest night of the week if you want to go out for music in the streets. They really do take music to the streets in Brazil. It's not an indoor thing. I mean, obviously some concerts happen inside. I think that can largely be because of weather and, again, culture. But yeah, I just love how in Brazil, I haven't been to Africa myself other than Mauritius, which is not part of the main continent. But culture happens a lot outdoors. We're outdoors a lot, you know. In Brazil, you learn to flip, you learn to play, you learn to celebrate your mate's birthday, to parade down the street when you're passionate about an anti-racism rally. You meet with all of your friends, you wear the same t-shirt, and you take your drums. Yeah, I find their culture's really inclusive, and everybody finds their clique and really active.
So you and I, we come together in an idea that embraces the indoors, the outdoors. There's food, there's music. I mean, what should we leave these guys with? What are we doing? What are we up to? What do we want them?
We
to,
wanted to have a discussion.
to
This is what I want them to do. We wanted to have a discussion on culture, and here we are. I mean, I hardly shared anything. I would love to speak in.
What can you do in half an hour, right?
I'd love to speak for 2 hours, but I would directly ask you to like to ask you. So my name is Netta Romani. And this is Zan Coleman. We're doing a theatre development at the moment in the country for Dining Room Tales, A is for Atlas, but I want you to write to me. I definitely want you to do this. Write to me, write to Zan, write to us,
please,
and continue the discussion on culture.
Yeah.
This is an open-ended invitation. I don't mind if it's in 10 minutes or in 10 years. Whenever you see this video, whenever you hear this invitation, I invite you to take part in the conversation. And
I'd add into that we're you know, at least at the point where we come together, there are so many things that we're interested in individually as well, but we're really keen to have conversations about gathering and about spending time, about sharing time and space with each other in ways that make us slow down and really stop and appreciate each other, because, you know, we're not just crazy beings whizzing past each other in super packed calendars of stuff. We are that too from time to time, but we, you know, how do we pause and what's the role of culture in, or is that culture? Is it in the pause somewhere? Don't know.
let's make our own culture together.
Yeah.
Let's remember culture is about communication and connection, and for me it is anyway, and I'd really like to invite you to take up that invitation. Connect. I wish you all the best for the Gala Week celebrations that you're up to.
Please, exciting.
Yes, very exciting.
All these
Send
bugs
us
down
reports.
here wish they could come and be there as well. They're
Yes.
trying to get into the shot right there.
Tell us your stories. Share your stories of the Gala Week. Tag yourself in my things so that I can see who you are. Tag us.
Yeah, and please come and engage with us
Come and
down
engage
too.
with us.
Come and sit at a dinner table with us, or come visit us down here in the countryside. You know, we're open doors, we're open spaces. So
Bring some bug spray.
yeah,
Have a great day, everybody, and continue to share culture. Thanks for listening.
See you later.
thank you everyone for being part of the Gala Ball this year. Next year, we really hope that we are in person and able to celebrate together. Thanks